As entrepreneurs, we face all kinds of challenges. One of the biggest ones is scaling up. And I have an extremely valuable guest for everybody who's been concerned with scaling up. See, once we get kind of past that initial stage, up to about 5 million in revenue, we've actually figured out. We've got an experience we're delivering, we're attracting clients. But most of us wobble at that point. It's a real challenge. Well, our next guest, Robert Hirsch, has taken 6 companies from 5 million to 50 million of revenue. He's going to share with us why those skills are so different, how you deal with the change, because there's change that has to be made to make that happen. And it's not that any road will do. You got to know which one to go down. I'm John Bowen, and we are at aesnation.com. Stay tuned, and you're going to see how to have some unbelievably exponential growth.
Ordinary success? No way. You want amazing, remarkable, exceptional breakthroughs. Dig deep, think bold, drive hard, watch yourself soar beyond your dreams. aesnation.com.
Well, Robert, I'll tell you, I'm excited for all my guests, but I'm really actually excited for me. I've only taken one company up to the 50 million. I've done a whole bunch at the 5 million, so I am paying attention. This is a big challenge for all of us as entrepreneurs. But first of all, thank you for joining us here at Accelerating Entrepreneurial Success.
John, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I've got you out in Austin here. I'm in Silicon Valley, so we're covering some of the technology hubs of the world. Tell me, as a little kid, you don't wake up and say, I'm going to be one of those guys that just takes companies and have explosive growth. How did this all happen?
Well, it's interesting. So I started I was a paper boy when I was 8 and 9, and I used the paper money to buy a lawnmower, and I opened my first physical store when I was 16 years old. And it was between my sophomore and junior year in high school. And by the time I graduated high school, I had 6 little stores, and they were little bead shops in Portland, Oregon. I always wear a necklace to remember where you came from. And that was kind of that inflection point, which for a young man is so important, of going from thinking that they can to knowing that they can. And so that was awfully exciting for me. And there were certain times that I worked for other companies and they worked for me. And it was a mutually agreeable situation. But I've been an entrepreneur now for 24 years last June.
Well, and so tell me, let's dive right into it, because
sure.
What happens is, in Silicon Valley, there's a term residents, CEO in residence, and you grab them and they're supposed to be able to do all the things that you're doing and everything like that. And some do, some don't.
Yeah.
But you've got a pattern of success. So I want to dive in. All of us are interested in that. And let's start with kind of we said 5 to 50 million. So let's start with a $5 million business. When do you know a $5 million business is capable of being a $50 million business?
Well, there's a few things, right? And it depends. And again, if it's taken 10 years to get to 5 million and you have an 80% market share, right, there might be a different issue there. But generally, if it catches wind very fast, for example, at my current company, at the Elevation Group, I started off as a chairman of the board. The first week we were in business, we did $3.5 million in sales at a 80% contribution margin. So we knew that we really hit a nerve and a level of resonance. My business partner, a guy named Mike Dillard, was the CEO of it, and he needed an external CEO about a year later. We never did less than $1 million in sales, and that's when I moved down from Aspen to Austin and took over. But the big piece is if it hits that chord with the people and it creates that emotional connection one to many, scaling is really an option and can be very, very effective.
Well, and so let's say I use the term nail it, then scale it type thing. And
sure.
So, the market is resonating obviously with you when you're getting that $1 million surprise type that, they're coming, the community's being built up, we get up to 5 million, do it over a relatively smooth period of time. What are some of the changes? Because a lot of the businesses, they get up to that, they're hardworking, they're driving, they're trying all kinds of new things. They get up to that 5 million. And then, I call it the wobble period. There's an inflection period. Unfortunately, sometimes the inflection's the wrong direction.
Right.
How do you, when you come in, Robert, how do you turn that around?
Well, it's interesting. Now, my background is pretty similar to yours, John. I was a venture-backed guy, and I did that for for 4 companies, for 7 rounds, for 9 years to realize it wasn't what I wanted to do. And when you take what I always think of as an entrepreneur in residence, or an entrepreneur that's taken it up to the wobble period, at that point they're working as hard as they can. And if an entrepreneur says, hey, I want to add a 0 to my business, it's simple. You just work 10 times as hard. And when you say that to an entrepreneur, often their eyes are going to roll.
Yeah,
Hey,
Robert, mine just did, because I've heard that one so many times, and there's only 168 hours in the week. That's it.
And that's linear growth, and linear growth doesn't work. And so until an entrepreneur realizes that linear growth isn't going to work for them, it's going to be really difficult to scale them. But once they do, the key takeaway is this: the skills that took you from 0 to 5 are not only different than the ones that are going to take you from 5 to 50, but they're juxtaposed. They're going to stand in your way. They're going to prevent you from growing. So for example, some of the skills, stick-to-itiveness, perseverance, hard work, that is really going to prevent you from delegating without empowering people, right? And to be able to delegate with empowerment is very difficult for an entrepreneur. So the gap that I'm talking about is a really classic one. It's really moving from first-line management to second-line management. And to be able to do that and to delegate without absconding responsibility can be very, very difficult. But there are a few things that make it a lot easier.
Well, let's stop here, because I want to get this is a big one. You and I have talked about it. We're in mastermind groups together, and this is one, because I actually am more the guy that starts firms.
Sure.
Okay, so I know when you say perseverance, I know that one. There's nothing when particularly as a successful individual, there's all kinds of expectations. Oh, you're going to start a new business, John? Oh, you're going to be hugely successful. So then you start working really hard. You get your core team together. You get it going. You pull a few all-nighters. The market doesn't resonate. You tweak it a few more times. You finally find the key. It starts working. Everybody takes a breath, and then goes little. You hit a milestone, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $4 million. Few drinks, you're at 5 million, you got a nice business, hopefully some good margins. There's that, geez, I got to start professionalizing it, and I got to bring in these other people, and you start bringing them in, and you go, they're not like me. And this is only because I've screwed this up so many times along the way. Robert, I just want to make sure our audience hears this dilemma, because in the back of their mind, it's so hard to bring people in and delegate, the responsibility and not advocate it. Not just, you got to stay involved, the whole thing. But how do we do that?
So there's a few things, right? So everyone's familiar with Tom Rath's work around strength-based leadership, and whether it's Myers-Briggs, whether it's Kathy Kolbe, I know you're familiar with the Kolbe models.
Well, I'm familiar with all of them. Gallupson, I hired actually one of the key research guys to come in and work with us on building up some of the research we have. So I'm real big believers on this. But it's one thing to take the test and get the results, and then, what do we do with it?
As an entrepreneur, what we have a tendency to do is hire people like ourselves. They're smart, they're this, they're that. And in the Kolbe framework, I'm a very high quick start, as I imagine you are.
I am indeed.
Sorry?
I am as well, too. And it's, the last thing you want in taking a 5 to 50 is have everybody be quick starters.
Which, by the way, is a classic mistake. So I often say that my company was founded by 2 quick starts, but it's run by high fact finder, high follow-throughs. So in that model, in fact, it goes in order: fact finder, follow-through, quick start, implementer. My quick start's a 9, but generally the profiles that work really well for me are 8 fact finders, 6 follow through, 7, 6, 8, something along those lines. So we really start to operationalize it. And as an entrepreneur, it's very tempting to hire people that look like you, that sound like you, that resonate with you. And that's actually, that's a great move for starting a business and building that synergy. It's a horrible move for scaling a business. And so, for example, my VP of operations, who I met 18 years ago, she was my alumni interviewer for the business school at UCLA. I didn't go to Anderson, but I hired both my Anderson and my Wharton interviewer. And she's been with me for 4 companies for almost 20 years. And my wife affectionately refers to her as my work wife. And she and I have a really good gig worked out, but we're very dissimilar, and we're very complementary. And as soon as we hit that spot, I have an executive team that I've worked with for a good portion of time, and they come in and we know exactly what we need to do to be able to scale it. For example, the attention to detail of Jamie, who's an 8-8 fact finder follow through, drives me crazy. But that needs to be done. And it really, in order to create the processes that people can follow and to systematize that, I need to be able to not only delegate it to her, but I need to empower her. Because so often, as you mentioned before, people abscond. An entrepreneur says, well, I gave that to Jamie. It's not my problem. And that's the absolute worst thing you can do as a leader. In fact, that's where you stand in your way. That's where you've hit 5 million and you're going to hit that wobble factor. And often what takes us to that wobble factor is the way that we think. And so we've gotten really, really specific. And so my model, which kind of aggregates a lot of the Myers-Briggs and a lot of the Strength Finder, and, is called the stupid human trick. And the stupid human trick is kind of interesting. It's the one thing that I do better than anybody else. And what I do really well is I know how to lead teams. And I don't do anything else in my business. I just do my stupid human trick. I can emotionally connect with my audience, and I can emotionally connect with my team. Everything else is outside of that. Now, if you take me back as an entrepreneur 15 years ago, I wouldn't do that. At this point, it's not what to do, it's what not to do. And what not to do is everything except my stupid human trick. And I do that as much as I can every day, whether it's creating videos for my team, whether it's talking to my team, whether it's creating videos for my customer, whether it's talking to my customer. But everything outside of that skill set, I am so regimented to saying no. I mean, my default is no, 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 no. And the only thing I do is that one thing, and that creates the most value that I can. It really allows me to have the output very disproportionate to the input, which is kind of the key to scale.
Well, and let's take a look here. I mean, when we start talking about this, Robert, what really jumps out at me is, the traits of getting the 0 to 5. It's experimenting like crazy. It's trying a whole bunch of things, shooting things up against the wall, and the market then eventually tells you, you know what, this is working. And then all of a sudden we start getting it working, and if we continue with that pattern, we tend to burn everybody out because, we don't really grow that much because we're trying new things, we're letting things that were good go. And then when we start putting the processes in place, I mean, these are people who, you said it, I can tell you I'm frustrated. I mean, they're asking all these detailed questions and it's so, it details an awful lot, but at the same time, boy, all of a sudden things start becoming effortless. They start being repeatable. The market responds over and over, and we can now expand, and we can spend money at attracting the right people. I mean, becomes magical, but it's so many entrepreneurs fight this so hard, and I know I did at times. I mean, how do we get past that?
So, everybody wants to diversify until they find a winner. And once you find a winner, then you want to focus. Mm-hmm. and then it becomes really clear, and it's really exciting, especially for an entrepreneurial profile like you and I, or like many of your listeners. When you have that entrepreneurial profile, you're tempted to do the spaghetti against the wall, but at that point you become your own worst enemy. So what I do at that point is I get really, really clear, and how I do that is I bring my team, and I usually do an offsite for a couple days, and I talk about where we are, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. How do you build a railroad between those 2 points, between A and B, and what is the straightest path? And once you do that and you have that agreement, and we all pull out our little pocket knives, pick our fingers, and sign off on the dotted line, anything outside of that path has to be agreed upon by the management team. And that really, really keeps us focused. And by the way, it's a great intersection for the quick start profiles like us and the fact finder follow-throughs like them. So they don't drive us crazy and we don't drive them crazy, which we're probably more likely to drive them crazy than they are us. But it becomes really simple. It becomes getting very clear on where we want to go, and very clear on how we're going to measure that, and very clear on the key performance indicators of what drives each member of our executive team. My VP of sales owns revenue. My VP of operations owns, gross margin. My CEO or myself, I own gross profit. We all have our real simple KPI that is reported in a very public fashion to our executive team to create accountability for the work that we're doing.
Now, this is so valuable, and these are hard-learned lessons, and the quicker we can get to that point, the more value there is for everyone. I mean, jokingly, we're talking about, we're going to go ahead and drive them crazy. Well, real world, they do drive us crazy, but we can ignore them. They can't ignore us. We pile stuff on and we can burn them out very quickly, and they're critical. And then the part I really like, Robert, is that the ownership part, where not only do they take responsibility for something, but there's key metrics that we have, the KPIs, the key performance indicators that are all agreed upon, so that they own, and we can have confidence in each other that we are driving toward that. And then there's a big promise, and I mean, this is a big one, that we're not going to go off track. If you leave the meeting, everybody's doing high fives, we're there, we're ready to go, and the next day somebody does something that's inconsistent with that destroys teams. If we're going to have a high performance team that's going to really pull together, everything you're saying is just so critical.
Well, so what we do is we do a weekly meeting, which I call the 3 to 5. And it was funny, my new admin kept wanting to put it at the hour of 3 to 5, which isn't it at all. It's the 3 to 5 priorities. Now, there was a study done by Metcalf out of the University of Texas in '97, and it looked at memorization. And memorization of a single number is very good. Memorization of 2 numbers is very good. But then there's a big plateau between 3 and 5. And then at 6, it drops off. So you remember as a child, if you and I were running to the payphone, I would remember the first 3 numbers, you'd remember the last 4. 555, 1212. We get there and I say 555, and you look at me and say 1212. So it turns out that our human brains can remember 3 to 5 things really well, and about the same amount. And so in our 3 to 5 meeting, what we're talking about is our strategic focus for that week. And those are our 3 to 5 priorities. And we use that to create accountability to hold everybody to that focus. So before we go into the 3 to 5, we present not only your KPI, but the entire executive team's KPI, which creates accountability, including mine. We then go over the 3 to 5, priorities that we're each working on, or the strategic initiatives that we are focused on between here and next week. We need to get, 4 interviews, and we need to cover blank, we need to do X, and we need to do Y. And so then it gets really simple. I get a little Post-it note, with my 3 to 5, and I have it on my desk. And if I'm ever confused, I take the 3 to 5 things that I need to do, that week. I circle the most important one, and I start with that. And this is actually a real key to productivity, which is a question that you didn't ask. But if you look at your 3 to 5 priorities, I circle the most important one. And the litmus test that I use for that is, if I did nothing else today, how would I meet my commitments to my team and to my customers? I circle the most important one, and I start with that at 9 a.m. when I have the most energy. And that's just in case it's 12:30 or 1 and business happens. You know how it is. I get to the office real early because I know the door is going to open. And the door can open for friends or for foes or for anything in between. Or it could be just as likely that you have some entrepreneurial friend that's in town that says, John, I'm in Silicon Valley. I'd love to meet you for lunch. And we haven't seen each other in ages. And you run up and you do sushi. But if you started off with the one thing that was most important, you'd know that you moved the ball forward for your team. So that really simple framework of what are the 3 to 5 strategic priorities, I agree to that with the team every Monday. I circle it. I start with the most important daily. And we have the accountability for our KPIs, which is a really simple or high-level 30,000-foot view of the framework that we use to get from A to B. But there's something that we haven't talked about. And that's really, so we talked about where we are, we talked about where we're going, and we talked about building the railroad. But sometimes when you build that railroad, it can be really painful, not just for you, but specifically for your executive team, right?
Oh, critical.
And you're going to create a lot of pain. And so my frame on that, and so a lot of people say, oh, it's not bad. And for 9 quick starts, or for high quick starts like us, change is great. We're going to do it.
Well, particularly when we are the ones putting it in place too. It's really good.
Yeah, clearly, right? It comes from a smart guy or gal. But for my fact finder follow-throughs, it drives them crazy, and they go, oh no, here goes Robert again. And so I use a pretty disarming frame on that, and I have it on the wall next to me, and it defines change, right? So the first quarter, the first thing we focus on, I call hope, something to be full of, right? That's where we're going, where we are, where we're going. Now, from getting there, I want to make the frame really honest. So the way I look at that is change, and it sucks now, and it's different later. And I'll repeat that, sucks now, different later. And but and so when they look at me and like, oh, this is so hard. I'm like, what's it doing? Like, it sucks. Like, what's going to happen later? Different.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, no, it's going to be better here. We're going to work through this, and we put all this in place, and look out.
But if you tell them the sky is not blue, or that it's not going to be painful to change, at that point you lose the buy-in of the leadership team, and that's kind of a critical piece. So when we talk about the change that we need to do and the growth that we need to do as an executive team, this is really a big opportunity. Something that we also do, we do a meeting every week, and this is we do it on Fridays, and we call it FAC, or our Friday Afternoon Club. And at 4:30, we get together and we do 10 minutes. So our first 10-minute meeting is me talking about the vision of the company to the entire team, not just the executive team, but to the entire staff about where we're going and the progress we made this week. And guess what I use as my agenda? The 3 to 5 from Monday, right? And the progress that we're going. So that creates accountability to the team that the executive team is managing. So for example, when I talk about Jamie, my COO's responsibilities, the operational team understands exactly what they were working on this week and how that added up to what we're going to be doing on Monday. So we do the 10-minute vision, and that really gets buy-in from the team and creates ground level support for my executives, which as a CEO, the most important thing I can do is to empower them and get out of their way. And the best way I know to empower them is to get the buy-in of their people. Because many of them are great managers, not all of them are great leaders. Once I give that leadership vision to their team, they buy in and they know exactly why they're working so hard for their manager. And so that's a big one. Then we do 10 minutes, which is an all-hands brainstorming session. And that's where anybody, it's amazing. For example, customer service, which, is a primary interface to your customer. They know so much more. It is such an untapped gold mine of information for scaling. Our best ideas always come from the people that are actually talking to the customers, not the people that are sitting in the big corner office in the ivory tower. And so we have an all-hands brainstorming session. And then we do something kind of interesting. So what we do is then we have hors d'oeuvres and beer and wine. No booze. We tried that, but it leads to bad things. Yeah. And so we too many entrepreneurial genes. So yeah. we then have beer and wine, and what we do is we invite any candidate, including multiple candidates for the same position, to the office for the Friday Afternoon Club. That's where they come in. So they come in, and we have sometimes 3 candidates for the same position. And you can just watch in body language who's comfortable, who's not, who's a cultural fit, who isn't. And there's so many people in HR that talk about the cost of a bad hire. Some people say it's 10 times the annual salary. I have no idea how they get to that number. For me, I can see how you get to 2 times the annual salary really easily. So the cost of doing the Friday Afternoon Club is really beer, wine, and hors d'oeuvres for the team for 52 weeks, right? Call that $5,000, $10,000 worth of food and booze. Now, if I save one bad hire a year, the thing pays for itself with 10x return. There's no way I would not do that any week at my company. So we have a really, really simple framework, right? We have the 3 to 5 with the executive team. We have full disclosure on all the key performance indicators. We go over, and then on the Friday Afternoon Club, the first 10 minutes is going over my priorities. My priorities are my team's priorities. Then we go over each of the team's priorities and their KPIs. We get buy-in. That's kind of the vision conversation where I help motivate my executive team's people. And then we do Friday Afternoon Club. And Friday Afternoon Club, it's interesting. You should see the people that grab me on the shirt sleeve and invite me, for a little conversation. Hey, did you know that of the people, that we said X, Y, and Z, 60% have said yes? No, I didn't. Right? And let's institutionalize that knowledge. And so we have a real informal side. And by the way, at Friday Afternoon Club, we do just the team for the first half an hour. Last half an hour, spouses, kids, we invite, it's a family affair. And then we get ready for our 3 to 5 next week. And that's really how we pre-brief it. So that's how we start the week, and that's how we end the week. And that's really the most important part for us in really managing through. You can't manage down for growth. You need to manage up. And a lot of people talk about servant leadership, but how do you walk that talk? And what it is, it's helping my managers lead, and it's helping my employees perform at their highest level. And the best way I know how to do that is to encourage them, to share the vision, to listen to them, to make sure they feel heard. And there is one other piece. We take all the information that we buy. I mean, I spend, well, as do you, we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in learning products. I mean, the best way I know to make risk not equal reward, or to increase reward and lower risk, is really simple. It's through education. And I love education. And what we do is we institutionalize that education through the team. So everything we get is available to every member of our team all the time. And what we do monthly is we do a book or a course together. And, you know, for example, the one we just did was an old favorite of mine by Vern Harnish, Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. And I've done Vern through EO for a bunch of years.
I had Vern speak yesterday at our conference, and he did a phenomenal job of closing it up.
Yeah, he's great. I mean, he's a great human. You know, and actually the 3 to 5 was derivative work of his tacticals. And so we just did Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, and everyone said, oh, that's why we do it that way. Oh, I get it. Hey, have we ever thought, and then they start adding, right? And they take emotional ownership. So, you know, how do you get your team, you know, to be, you know, we have multiple members of our team that have our logo tattooed on them.
Okay, I was with you up to that point. I haven't had anybody do that to my knowledge. At least they haven't shared with me. But Robert, let me touch on, because these are, you know, the big thing here that I want all of us as entrepreneurs to be thinking about, because, you know, really, Robert is an extreme quick starter. But what he's done in his quick starting is he's created framing. Okay, and you can disagree whether it's 2 and 4 versus 3 and 5. I mean, there's little fine-tuning things we could all argue about and so on. But what's so valuable, and this is where you should listen to this recording a few times. You know, go back to aesnation.com and get the transcript, and make sure you have the system. Every company that I've ever had, Robert, that, you know, we really took off, we did what you're doing. I mean, I have little different nuances and so on, but we had the identical thing for all practical purposes, because what we did is we got everybody on the bus, you know, whoever's guruism we're going to use, we got everybody on the bus is pointing in the right direction, and we kept on checking in with each other, and we kept on having each other be responsible for different parts, and that's where it really comes together. Let me switch gears for a second, because I want to follow through on my promises on these recordings. Although this is so phenomenal, I'm tempted to keep going. But I want to hit you up for some other things here. So let's go to, you know, I promised the entrepreneurs I'm going to share with, you know, all these creative individuals I get the privilege of interviewing, like yourself, and hanging out at mastermind groups. Because really what this is, Robert, is it's a virtual mastermind. You know, you and I are sharing some of the insights, sitting next to the last time at Joe Polish's 25K meeting, where we were kind of kicking around some ideas and, you know, trying to make things happen for each other. And this is the value of masterminds for all of us. But I want to go to a simple one to execute. Let me go to this segment. Okay, one of the promises I have, Robert, is the application of the day. What's a smartphone application that you use to help you do all this stuff?
All right, so I'm going to give you a qualifier on this one, because we talked about this a little bit this morning. Now, if you're a high quick start, if you're a fact finder follow through, don't listen to what I'm saying. Just pause the recording for just a second, or turn down the volume.
Or hit the speed button, go by real quick here.
Hit the speed button, go by it. But if you're an entrepreneur and if you have a high level of quick start, and you really want, you know, for example, when I read Getting Things Done by David Allen, which has been over 20 years ago, that was such a liberating book, because it allowed me to free brain space. And so whenever I think of something, I need a place to dump it, so it doesn't just come up as this nagging thing in my head of, oh, I need to do this, oh, and I can't forget this, oh, and I can't. And that, right, that is the plight of the quick start. And so there is a great program, which I will rarely recommend a $30 or $40 iPhone app. It's called OmniFocus, OMNI.
Yeah, I've just put it up on the screen, and you can Google OmniFocus.
It integrates between my iPad, my iPhone, my desktop computer, my cloud. And so, for example, I have everything in there that I am thinking about for my business, or for my investments, or for my house, or for the, you know, I have 52 different date night ideas that I'm working on for my wife for date night. So anything that comes to my mind, I just brain dump it there, and I know it's going to be okay. And once I know it's there, I don't have to think about it. I don't have to remember it, and it frees up that brain space to allow me to be here now, or to be very present wherever I am. So OmniFocus is a life changer for me.
Yeah, I use Evernote. I'll have to look at yours, but I mean having any place as an entrepreneur to dump this stuff out so it's not in your mind coming out at 2 a.m. type thing is so invaluable.
Absolutely. Well, keeping the Post-it notes by the bed is always a good idea too.
Yes.
It's not a very sexy app.
Yeah, no, it doesn't quite work, and you might have to come up with 100 date night ideas if you do that here. But let's go to the next segment. What's the book? I mean, you are a well-read guy. You're very knowledgeable. You love this stuff. You and I are both passionate. I mean, you can see all the books behind me. And I got most of them electronically anymore. I won't buy any hard-covered ones, not because I don't like reading the hardcover. It's just there's too many of them all throughout the house. What's the one you would recommend to your fellow entrepreneurs?
Well, I mean, it's pretty simple, and it can be a bit polarizing, but it was the book that changed my life. And, my mission is really simple. It's achieving freedom through contribution. And Ben Franklin defined a self-made man or woman as anyone that doesn't like their station in life, and through virtue, integrity, and hard work changes that. And that for me really defined it. And so the book would have to be Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up on Kindle, and you can buy it for $8, and I'm going to go with you. It's an amazing book.
I mean, it's exceptional. It changed your life. And there's so many things that you can take out of it. But what is it to be a proud producer or a proud contributor? Hank Reardon, one of the protagonists in the book, he perfected his recipe for steel for 10 years before he introduced it to the marketplace. And I remember reading that, and I remember thinking of the pride in craft. And I knew that if I was going to introduce something to the marketplace, it would have to be extraordinary. It would have to be the best I could do. And if it wasn't worth doing. And so that book changed my philosophy in so many ways.
And mine as well. And I remember reading it just really early when it came out, and I've got it. It's one of the few books that I have behind me that I go back and look at every once in a while, and it just kind of reminds me of what we're doing and the impact that we're having and how important it is. And this is one of the things as fellow entrepreneurs, oftentimes we're not really understood. This is a book that helps you understand what you're doing. Okay, let me go to my favorite segment here, Robert.
What a good segue.
Well, it is, because we're looking for the number one entrepreneur insight of the day from you. Because you've been sharing so many good things. I mean, I'm gonna definitely go through this a couple of times.
Sure. So number one insight of the day. So when I'm thinking about scale, the one thing that I think a lot of people miss is they think that they can do it. And this is the area where you're transitioning from you can do it to we can do it. And so when I look at an org chart or an organizational chart, John, you and I came from a very similar background in Silicon Valley, right? And you have your CEO, and then you have your VP of everything, and your director of blank, and then your M level, and then your high level contributors. Mm-hmm. And an org chart looks like a big pyramid down. So what I do when I draw an org chart is I draw the CEO at the bottom. That's me. And I'm responsible for holding up the organization, kind of like Atlas with the organization on my shoulders. And the top of it is customer service and sales, the people that talk to our customers. That's the top of the internal org chart. And on top of that, we actually have our customers. But in our world, without a customer, there is no company. And we have the customer, we have the people that are supporting the customer, we have the people supporting them, and then at the bottom, there's me. And a lot of people give lip service to servant leadership. And for me, what I love to do is I love to grow leaders. I love to empower them. I love to help people achieve things that they thought were greater than they ever assumed. And so we start at the top or the bottom, depending on how you look at it. But the customer is number one. Anybody that talks to a customer is number two. Anybody that manages them is number three. And then there's my executive team and myself at the very bottom. And that's the way we run our organization. But if there is no customer, there is no company. People talk about, it was very trite in bestsellers, and who's ever had an original thought, of customer-centric, and that being new, which totally misses the point. The customer is the only thing. And if you can exceed their needs and deliver something of value, you'll create a position of value for yourself. But the more you can give to them, the more value you can create for yourself. And I guess this is the key point of it. If you do business the right way, the amount of money that you make is directly proportional to the amount of people that you help. So the frame for me as a CEO is, how can I help more people?
Yeah, and make a bigger impact. And, for every person that we have the privilege of touching, and this is, why you and I love markets. They tell you whether you're adding value or not very, very quickly.
And the score is very easy to tell.
Well, let's go. We're coming near the end, and I just want to make sure the next segment they're going to care about. Resources. Let me pull up your website. I'm going to the elevationgroup.com for those of you who are listening to us on the audio podcast, and you can see the screen on the video podcast. And then obviously you can always come to our website at aesnation.com and get all the links that Robert and I talked about. But Robert, what are they going to find? What are some of the resources here on this beautiful, I love sailing, it's a beautiful picture there, and teaching the world how to invest like the rich is something that most of us kind of like.
I know I do. And, there's two real things that we teach at the Elevation Group. We have the Elevation Group, which is targeted really towards entrepreneurs. So if you're listening to this and you identify as an entrepreneur, what you know how to do is how to make money, right? And the whole 2,000 hours principle, meaning we work 2,000 hours a year, and as entrepreneurs, we're probably 2,500 to 3,000. And, for me, I've done this for 24 years. That's more than 50,000 hours that I've spent figuring out how to do my craft, which is entrepreneurship. And John, you're probably in the same category. But when I think about how does my money work for me, well, I put significantly less effort into that. My solution to many things was just make more money. But what I've really done for the last 4 years, and my business partner and I have gone out, we've interviewed the smartest people in the world in finance, everything from Richard Branson down in Necker Island to the Tom Wheelwrights or the Ken McElroys. And we said, okay, how do we transfer the money that we make, and how do we turn that into passive income? How do we have that make money for us? And what we did was, and we are not financial advisors, and we're not licensed in anything. We went out and we talked to the smartest people that we could, and we documented it, and we sold that for $50 a month or $300 a year. And in fact, just in those memberships, we did $3.5 million of memberships in our first week in business alone, and never did less than $1 million a month. So it really hit this nerve. So that was the part of Elevation Group, which is how does my money work for me? And then there's Elevation Income, which is our entrepreneurial courses. And that is 460 written pages in 10 hours. I was, a few years ago, and you know this, but I don't share this often, I was diagnosed with a rare form of leukemia. And at the time, my wife was pregnant. And so this is after I got diagnosed with leukemia and before I went into chemotherapy, I recorded these videos and this course. And that was really the frame as a gift to my child, just in case. And it's everything I wish I knew about entrepreneurship getting into it. Entrepreneurs, that's our target market. Those are our people. Most people don't get us, and that's okay. But we're really focused on one, how do you have greater results in your business? And secondly, when you make that money, how does that money work for you? Because again, my mission is freedom, and freedom through contribution. And the more entrepreneurs we set free, the greater impact we have. And it's my firm belief that entrepreneurial energy is the greatest untapped resource on the planet, and it'll get us out of the mess that we're in. There was another book by Ayn Rand, which is The Fountainhead, and there was a character in The Fountainhead named Virgil. And Virgil asked this question that changed my life. And Virgil asked the question of who helps the helpers. And when I read that, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And the answer is I do. And you do. That's what you're doing here, John.
Well, and that's what all of us do here, that fellow entrepreneurs. And this has been so valuable, Robert. And let me go to the last section so I can summarize. Let me share with everybody my key takeaways. The very first thing is there's a difference between going from 5 to 50 million, and that's number one. And we need to know that, and we need to make sure we understand that there's a difference there, because so many of us have worked really hard, built a business that's pretty successful. Our friends think we're doing phenomenal. We're not doing all that we're capable of doing, and more importantly, we're not delivering the value to the rest of the marketplace that we could. We got to recognize there's a difference. Second is process, 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 process. Creating the systems, nail it, then scale it. Make sure, if you're a quick starter, as Robert and I were talking about, that you bring in the right people. Third, let everyone around you know that it's going to be painful to change. And it's a different dynamic than the dynamic that brought you to 5 million. But there is, it's an amazing business moving from 5 to 50 million and seeing it all come together. And the last one I want to do is a commitment both, Robert, you and I have made big investments. I know we spend over $100,000 a year each and every year is lifelong learning. This is just huge. And, with that, Robert, I want to thank you again. I mean, this has been a privilege to have you here. I count you as a good friend, and having you share this in our virtual mastermind is invaluable. Thank you.
I'm so grateful to be here, John. Thank you again. And what you're doing is doing great things for the entrepreneurial community. I'm happy to support anytime.
Well, and let's go out there, all our fellow entrepreneurs, our like-minded entrepreneurs that are ready to lift, the Atlas, no problem lifting this stuff and making a big dent in the universe. Remember, your clients, your customers, your current ones, your future ones, they're all counting on you. Don't let them down. Wish you the best of success.
All the best.
Exceptional, remarkable breakthroughs. AESNation.com.